Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with a review and final diagnosis on the Chris Reeve Knives Large Inkosi. If you go back on my channel, you can catch the unboxing video on this knife, as well as a surgery video where I take it apart. There's also a review on the small Inkosi where I talked about how awesome it was and how much I enjoyed it to the point that I had to buy this knife. Also bear in mind that I used to own a Sebenza 25. That was before I ever started Dr. Frunkey, and I liked that knife a whole lot, and after I sold it, I ended up regretting it, and so all those factors combined made me really want to get this knife. I've carried this now for a couple of months, so I feel like I can give you my final diagnosis and kind of run through this knife and talk about what I like and maybe what I didn't like so much. So if you'll recall, we've got about a 3.6-inch blade, about 4.75 inches of handle, about 4¼ inches of grip area. It's about 0.59 inches in overall thickness. It's got 140 thousandths thickness on the blade, and it comes in at 4.85 ounces. So this is a very nice size. I have really enjoyed these larger knives. I'll bring out a couple of other knives for a size comparison. Here is the Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3. What you're going to notice is that the overall size profile is rather similar to the Paramilitary 2, the Inkosi being a slight bit bigger, and that is okay. I really enjoy that. You get a lot of blade in this knife. Speaking of the blade, let's break this knife down anatomically. Up front is that beautifully done 3.6 inches of S35 VN. S35 VN steel is ubiquitous in the industry today, and so many people, after I make a Chris Reeve video, say, oh, S35 VN is crap. Why is it on this high-end knife? Why am I paying that much for this? Well, it is extremely special on these knives. Chris Reeve and a few of the other major knife makers in the industry a few years back went to crucible particle metallurgy, and they developed an evolution of S30V, S35VN. The addition of some vanadium and some niobium changed the properties of the steel to a place that Chris Reeve felt was ideal for a folding knife, where it gives it a nice amount of toughness and edge retention and corrosion resistance. And so it's really a great steel. And the reason that we see it across the entire industry, including a whole bunch of Chinese-made knives, I'll go ahead and bring on a Kaiser I've got sitting right here in S35VN, is because it's just that good. It really is that good. In my experience, S35VN is very easy to sharpen, never rusts, and holds a very nice edge. Now this blade in particular is one that I absolutely adore. In my few months of using this knife, I have never been disappointed in the performance. That's for a couple of reasons. Number one is the steel. Number two, this knife comes with a nice, perfect drop point blade shape. I really love the drop point blade shape on this. It is classic. There are not many blades that are shaped better than this for overall function. It has a crowned spine and it remains quite thick out to the tip, so you have a very strong tip, but it's also a nice piercer. Another thing that I enjoy about this blade and why it works so well is that it has a convex grind. This is something that you develop by sharpening your knife on a rather relaxed sharpening belt. And it allows the edge, instead of being a straight V, to be more of a U shaped, but it's got a sharp tip at the end, and so it makes the tip last a lot longer. It keeps it very strong. And after a few months of use where I've cut through cloth, rope, food, lots of cardboard, and a significant amount of paper, there's no change in the edge almost at all. After a couple of quick strops, this thing goes right back to very, very, very sharp, and I've never been disappointed in the performance. Another aspect that I really like is the sort of not so deep hollow grind that they've got going on. The Sebenza comes with a very deep hollow grind, and it's very thin behind the edge. This knife comes in at actually 0.026 inches, which is only a hair thicker than the 0.024 found on the Paramilitary 2, one of the best slicers out there. So it's a very good slicer, even though it's a bit thicker behind the edge. I honestly couldn't tell a huge difference in comparing this to a regular Sebenza. I just appreciate that it's a bit thicker and I don't have to worry so much if I ever needed to use this knife in a harder setting. Another thing I really enjoy is the ramp right here. This is something that's added past the Sebenza that's not on the Sebenza. This thumb ramp right here is extremely comfortable, very functional, and I've really enjoyed having it there. I find that my hand fits onto this much better than on the Sebenza, and to have that ramp right there is very comfortable. Now let's get into an area of the knife that is really not my favorite, and that's the action, deployment, and pivot system. So in terms of deploying the knife, you have to use these thumb studs. With all the evolutions of the Sebenza, they have kept these thumb studs, and to be honest, they are probably some of my least favorite in the industry. Number one, they look like a nipple, true story. Number two, they're a bit uncomfortable, and when I say a bit, I mean very. They're just not very comfortable things. If you open the knife in the traditional sense, you have to bear down on that thing, and it comes to a rather sharp point so that your thumb has a big dent in it, and you feel it every time. Now, someone like me who opens knives all the time, I've sort of deadened my thumb right here, but I do recall that it hurt a considerable amount when I first started doing it. Moreover, on the ones that are the blue titanium thumb stud, the blue wears off almost immediately and makes this a shiny silver, and that's just very annoying to me. I have to buy these with the silver thumb stud or I'm going to lose my mind. Add to that the fact that the action, while incredibly smooth, is not very fast. It actually took quite a bit of fine-tuning to be able to achieve any element of thumb flickability on this knife. I know that they don't really encourage that, but it's something that holds me back from really recommending this knife all the time, because I feel like in today's market, with so many knives that are ball-bearing flippers and things like that we're all used to very smooth and very fast actions. And there actually can be knives just like that with thumb studs that fly open very nicely. And so even though the pivot is maybe stronger than those ball-bearing flippers and other things because of the fact that it has these large phosphor bronze washers, they hold a lot of grease and they allow for a smooth action, it's just not as much fun as some other knives. And so that is something that I think holds people back in today's market. Now, if you really need a tough knife, this is the way to go, because that is not going to fail on you, the pivot and everything. But it is something that in today's market is going to keep these knives from selling as quickly as maybe they could. I would love to see a revision of the pivot system and of the thumb studs. If you could get this knife with a nice snappy detent so that it just flew out of the handle, but still had these phosphor bronze washers, I really think that that's achievable, but they don't do it. What I do understand, what I do appreciate is that they changed the stop pin right here so that it just travels straight through the titanium frame and is not affixed here on the front and only on the back, so it doesn't affect the action. So all the tuning is right here in the pivot only, and that makes it nice and easy. Another thing that I noticed is that when I disassembled the knife and put it back together, that the knife immediately went completely on center. That's something that you can tell in a very well-made knife. If you put it together and it's still loosey-goosey, but the knife is perfectly on center, that means you've got a really nice knife. This knife has beautiful build quality. It is among the very best of any knife I have ever handled. And I have handled knives from the very worst to some of the very finest in the world. And in that pivot, the reason that it's not that smooth is that everything is so tightly put together to such precision that it's mind-boggling. When I took this knife apart, I had never seen another knife with that sort of tight fit and finish. There's a lot of discussion about what the meaning of tolerances is, but in production, the tolerances are very tight in Chris Reeve production, meaning that the fixtures go together very precisely every time, and I have been blown away by that. Moving back to the handles, these are extremely ergonomic pieces of titanium. I love the way it fits in my hand. I can imagine that some hands won't be perfect for these milled out holes, but in my larger hands, it's ideal. Add to that the micarta inlays. I really enjoy that. Even though it makes it a little bit thicker, it's way more comfortable in the hand. The regular pocket clip is perfectly functional, and I've added this millet clip to it because it makes it a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more beautiful. So what is my final diagnosis on this knife? My final diagnosis is this is the gold standard, and there's a good reason for that. This thing is made with the gold standard for steel, the gold standard for fit and finish and quality, the gold standard for locking mechanisms. Chris Reeve invented the integral lock. He basically invented S35VN. So it is an honor to own this knife, and to see the precision and the perfection that has gone into this is really mind-blowing. There is a reason this is held to such high regard. Well, what do you guys think of this knife down below? Leave some comments. Go ahead and click like and subscribe. And as always, guys, take care.